Foresight. My name is Nat Fuller. Gaming and simulation is a very profitable industry, ladies and gentlemen. In 2015, there were 2 billion video gamers across the world, and this figure is expected to rise to over 3 billion by 2023. It is expected that the global gaming market will amount to around 269 billion US dollars annually in 2025, up from 178 billion US dollars in 2021. Despite the average daily time spent playing games amongst kids, the hobby can no longer be considered solely child's play. In fact, studies show that video gaming is gaining popularity amongst parents across the world. North America is set to remain the top grossing gaming market worldwide, despite the growth in the Asian region. In-game purchases are expected to account for more than 74 million US dollars worldwide in 2025. Gaming and simulation is being used for not only entertainment, academia, but also government needs. To discuss gaming and simulation more deeply, I have an all-star subject matter expert from the University of Baltimore. Mr. Aaron Olderberg is a Baltimore-based game interactive video artist. His work has been exhibited in festivals and galleries in New York, Johannesburg, London, and Los Angeles. His games have been written about in Kill Screen, Baltimore City Paper, The Rock, Paper, and Shotgun. Aaron teaches game designs as a professor at the University of Baltimore Simulation and Game Design program, and has a Master's of Fine Arts from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. His writing on games has been published in Game Studies, Journal of Gaming, Virtual Worlds, and the Proceedings of International Symposium of the Electronic Art. In October 2003, he finished 2 years as a HIV health extension agent for the Peace Corps in Mali. Aaron, welcome to Foresight.
Thanks for the really nice introduction. It's really nice to be here.
Great, it is awesome to have you here. Gaming and simulation is a very, very interesting topic, and I have a whole bunch of questions for you, sir. So hopefully you're ready.
I am.
Aaron, what I'll do is I'll present some additional facts about gaming and simulation along with a challenge question for your review and feedback. So are you ready, sir?
Yeah.
All right, awesome. Let's get into this. Gaming kind of refers to playing electronic games either through some type of console, computer, mobile phone, or another medium together, right? Simulation, though, is a little bit different than gaming because it's sort of like you're replicating or simulating the operations of real world processes or systems over time. Usually simulations require some type of modeling or some type of model that represents key characteristics of behaviors or selected systems or processes. So, Aaron, with that being said, sir, why do you think in our society gaming is so popular?
That's a really good question. So I'm going to I'm not going to try to get too academic on this, but one thing that I think games do really nicely is they give us a meaning to our actions, right? A lot of times our everyday actions, we don't get necessarily a lot of feedback on our actions. We don't get a lot of response to the meaning of our actions. We don't necessarily know what impact they take in the overall system in a satisfying way, but games do that, right? A good game gives you immediate feedback. You get a sense of what your actions are doing in the overall system. You know, if you're thinking about like a score on the very basic level, or you know, maybe you have achievements, and there's a history of your event. It sort of writes this history of your game, and it makes you feel, you know, incredibly important. Oftentimes, especially, you know, if you're playing a superhero game or something like that. Right. But there's a very, you know, satisfying sense that that my actions have a very direct impact. They have a meaning, and they impact the system that seems very large, right? Oftentimes systems are open, they're city-based, and our actions, you know, change the course of the inhabitants of that city or that location. There's also, I was revisiting the book Rules of Play,
Right.
Sailor and Eric Zimmerman, which is, if you go into the university and study game design, you'll most likely have a theory class. You being, the audience, you'll most likely study this book, right? And they talk about there's a chapter called Games as the Play of Pleasure, which I really like, and it talks about, it sort of divorces these discrete pleasures from sort of the structure that you think of as a game. Like, you think of the goal and the conflict and the challenges and all that stuff. But there's also these other little tiny pleasures that you don't necessarily think about. There's one of my favorite is the taboo breaking, right? Reason why murder games are so popular. But there's also other kinds of taboos, right? Like annoying other people, jumping up on tables in an open world game in the middle of a restaurant, doing things that you can't do in real life. That's one of my more fun things, one of my favorite things to do in games. But there's also the imaginative play. Obviously there's a role-playing element of it. There's slapstick, through things like glitches and physics-based humor. And there's also the theorist Roger Caillois, which I might probably talk about a couple times in here. He talks about one of his most interesting concepts is that of ilinks. He categorizes his pleasures of play into 4 different categories, and ilinks is what he calls the pleasure of vertigo and physical sensation. And that's where we get like when kids get dizzy,
Right.
It's like turn around and get dizzy and fall down. It's that
Right.
or when people do drugs like hallucinogens,
Right.
it's that experience of sort of almost out of body experience. And I think we get that from certain VR games and like racing games.
Right.
And I've definitely noticed in my own development, like there was a game that I was making at one point that just wasn't going anywhere. It was a top-down 2D game. I was seeing someone whose daughter was kind of my play tester, and she said some really cruel things about it. And I was like, oh, I gotta really revise this thing. And I thought about this concept of ilinks and this idea of sort of like making confusing the player's senses. And I created something a lot better, using this theory. And there's also this idea of flow, right? That that you can get outside of games. People can get it when they really like their job, or if you're an artist and you're just sort of inhabiting the artwork you're making. But good games do it really well too. And flow is the theory of optimal experience, where you have something where you know the goal.
Right.
What you're doing is not too hard for you, and it's not too easy for you.
Sure.
And when you're in that sense of experience, you have this loss of the sense of self and a loss of the sense of time. And then there's things like risk taking, which is really nice. You have a choice to take a low risk for low reward, or take a high risk for a high reward, and you have that sort of stimulus. So.
Sure.
Lots of things, right? Yeah. Of course, that's why gambling is it's also a popular form of game. Can't forget gambling when we talk about gaming, because for some people, that's what the word gaming means, right?
Right.
is gambling.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
you know what? You touched on a lot of different interesting things there. So, when I think about when I was a kid, and to me, Aaron, I don't know how old you are, but with me, it was like Pac-Man and like Donkey Kong and all cool games. It was
Super Mario Brothers.
Right.
Yeah.
It was the whole aspect of like getting away for whatever issue or whatever problem I may be dealing with, and just being in this virtual environment where I can just have at least 20 to 30 minutes where I can just be anything I want. Right.
Do
you think, and I think you touched on that, in terms of virtual reality, but how much of that you think is like very significant with the popularity of gaming? The
escapism, right? Yeah, I think escapism is a big thing. And I think, a lot, there's a lot of, coming from an art background, there's sort of like there's sort of a, looking down your nose at escapism, because sort of art nowadays is sort of about being, confronting people with, things and things like that. But there's a lot of different kinds of escapism, and there's a lot of different kinds of, transcendence also. I think transcendence is another is sort of can be paired with escapism. Like I did a series of games that sort of explored like spirituality and things like that, and that being a form, that is not, people think of escapism as sort of just this thing where you're just avoiding the world, but there's
Right.
there's just like there's so many different types of realities. I mean, our brains are creating reality, and we're just choosing how we're creating reality. And so, um, like, yeah, I think games are just another form of that.
Cool.
And I know we're I know we're talking about sort of simulations and education later, but I was pointed to this article. My partner sent it to me about how they studied Tetris and word games.
Right.
And it was if people had recently been through a trauma and they went and played Tetris, or even more so if they played a word game,
Right.
they wouldn't. It would. I forget what the exact intrusive memories would be much lower.
Gotcha.
Because it'd almost be like they reprogram themselves.
Right.
And it's like, I
Well,
think,
you know what, and actually, Aaron, that makes sense, because I mean, in the virtual world, you can actually reprogram yourself. I mean,
yeah,
like how you are virtually, then you have so much creativity in that particular space to do anything you want.
right. Sometimes when we escape from the real world, we come back to the real world as a better person, right? Like,
Right.
I mean, a better person. You're happier, more able to deal with people.
Right.
Obviously, there's you can spend too much time on your iPad and get irritable, of course, as well. But yeah, there's
A lot
clear
of
reasons
different, a
why
lot
it's
of different
popular.
things. Yeah, a lot of different things you can try out, and I think everything you
Yeah,
cover is um it attributes to why gaming is popular. There's so much you can do,
yeah,
so much creativity
yeah.
that you can have in that world. So,
Right.
all right, cool.
And
Hey, awesome answer there, Aaron. So, hey, let's talk a little bit about simulation, right? So, I know that they're similar to a certain extent, right?
right.
But they're slightly different.
Yeah.
Why do you think simulation is popular?
Yeah. And just to go into like definitions, when you talked about definitions earlier, like definitions are really fun with game and simulation.
Right.
And if it's okay, I'll kind of talk a little bit about the variety of definitions of games as well as simulation.
Right.
So pinning down a definition of game is kind of a recent historical thing. Like throughout history, game has had kind of a fluid definition that's kind of game and play. People popular usage didn't pin it down super clearly.
Right.
And like Kaiwa, who I was talking about recently, he had a really nice definition of play, which was, and pardon me for looking off the screen at my notes every once in a while,
Hey, no
because
worries.
I didn't memorize his definition.
Yeah, no
But,
worries. I do the same thing.
yeah. But one of his qualifications of play is that it's free, as in freedom.
Right.
It's you choose to play. It's separate from ordinary life. It's uncertain, meaning the end. You don't know how it's going to end.
Right.
It's unproductive. It's not, you're not trying to do something productive with it. Although, when we look at serious games later, maybe that doesn't necessarily have to be a part of it.
Right.
It's always got rules around it. It's make believe. But recently, some people have kind of tried to pin down a much more clear definition of games. And one academic definition of games is that, there's clear conflict, there's rules, there's an uncertain end state, there's a but I think artists and independent game designers have used more we like to have definitions that are very open and are easy to push against. And a game designer his name is David Kanaga. He brings in Kaiwa's definition of play and calls video games digital play spaces. And so so leading from that onto simulations also, it's used in different ways in different places. And so one definition of simulation is specifically, non-game. It's you're simulating a system, in possibly a scientific setting.
Sure.
But in a way, also all games are simulations, right? They're all simulating some aspect
Right.
of reality. They're all like they're all procedurally describing some aspect of reality. So they're, if you're simulating, in Mario, you're simulating running around and jumping, right? But in our program, in our game design program, when we talk about simulation, we're talking about, we're using it to reference non-gaming simulations, right? Like if you're creating a training simulation for the workforce or something like that. Sure. And I think that's really popular, especially if you're talking about educational simulation. And I don't know if that's exactly the way you're meaning it, but an educational simulation for training and things like that, I think part of the popularity is the best way to teach another person is still an unsolved problem, right? Sure. We still, as we have, there's so many different learning styles, and there's so many different and I think simulation brings, like non-gaming simulation, training, serious games, they bring in a few pieces of that puzzle. They allow, obviously self-paced learning, but there's this feature that games and simulations have, any kind of interactive system has, which is, and the first place I heard this was in this very non-academic text, Stephen Levy's Everything Bad is Good for You. The way he starts that off with, he talks about how you initially engage with a game or a simulation is that you look at the space, you look at what's in front of you, you form a hypothesis based on what you see about what you can do in that space. And you hypothesize about, like, if I do this, this is going to happen. Sure. And then you test that hypothesis, you probe the system, and then you get feedback on that. Right. And what a great way to learn things, right? What a great way to learn. And so this way of interactively testing, and if you have like a, this is kind of a silly, we used to take students on field trips to Walter Reed Medical Simulation Center, which is an amazing place, right? Walter Reed, where veterans and go for serious injuries. Their training center uses all sorts of simulation, right? Like they have something that's sort of like a cave, which is sort of a life-size room scale VR environment, where you are, medical trainees are to practice their medical techniques, while in the background in Baghdad, like bombs are falling and things are shooting and things like that. And so this sort of probing and testing, my silly example is they have haptic feedback. They have these little joysticks where you feel things happening to give you this sort of haptic feedback. And there was this thing where you give a colonoscopy, and you're using the joystick to navigate around the colon, and you feel it when you're kind of pressing up a little with the camera, you're pressing up against the sides of the colon. So I just went ahead and pushed a little bit further with that until I felt myself poked through the edges of the colon. And, got myself a medical malpractice lawsuit. Yeah. But anyway, so that's a really sort of visceral example of probing and testing the system.
Hey, but that's simulation too, right? Simulation malpractice suit, right?
Right, exactly.
So Aaron, that's cool, man. And I totally agree with you. I think simulation can really help out in terms of making, like, I think of it like workplace improvements, right? Like one of the biggest things that I've seen simulation kind of introduced in certain workplace, you see a lot about the insider threat, right? The shooter, right? People come in and, they're bringing in a gun and they're shooting up the whole place. Well, I've seen certain organizations who are like bringing in these simulation games and models, and they're actually running through a scenario virtually on what to do, if that does occur, right? And again, because it's visual, and people really learn because of the actual feeling of maybe being afraid, or the actual tense situation, that you're really trying to train them to think in a calm manner, even though they're in a very life-threatening, situation.
Right. It's that sort of separateness, right? Like
Right.
you can then sort of intellectually practice these things. So you get that muscle memory, that motor memory. You like build these instincts so that when your real oh crap comes in, and you can't think logically, you have that sort of built into you. That makes sense.
Exactly. All right. Awesome. Hey, Aaron, I'm learning so much from you, sir. But hey, that's only your second question, so we got like a couple more.
Okay.
So let's kind of jump in here and look
at. Okay. Yeah. Let me know if we're
the next one here.
Go faster.
So way too far. So hey, we gave a little bit of bio about yourself, Aaron, and your background. You've done a lot in the gaming industry. What do you tell people, or what do you think one needs to have to become like a game simulator, or building simulation or building games? Like, what do you think? How do you even get to that point?
Right. So a lot of people, in the early days of the game industry, there were no degrees or anything like that. Right. Everyone there was pretty much self-taught. Maybe they have a computer science degree. I wouldn't say everybody was self-taught, but a lot of people had computer science degrees, or they were, self-taught, no university education. And I think nowadays that still sometimes happens. And no matter what, it's really important, if you're passionate about being a game designer, that you take an interest with thinking about how this game works, how you can tear it down, how you can take a break from playing games and download a game development software like Unity or Godot or Unreal or something like that, and get in there and start learning a coding language. And if you're interested in doing the art side of it, of course, there's software you can start teaching yourself. Blender is a great open source software.
Right.
Getting into online communities can give great harsh, or at least blunt feedback. That can be really helpful. And also, of course, I think nowadays, no matter how good your skills are, there are other people with very similar skills. Sure. And having a degree can also give you that leg up, because it stands out amongst the other applicants.
Right.
I'm
sorry. Let me ask you this question though, because I know in your bio, you're like kind of extraordinary, because you kind of have this art, like this artist, but this visual graphic type person. Do you think it's harder for the artist to become a game developer, or do you think it's easier for the game developer to become, or to have artistic creativity? Like, which one do you think is harder?
Yeah. My background is kind of weird, because I've been doing programming type things since I got into like BASIC when I was 7 years old. So like I've always been kind of a programmer, but I never there was always this calling that kept me from going straight into computer science, where there were just things. I think I got sidetracked somewhere in high school, where I just got into avant-garde movie directors and things like that, and I wanted something more from the games I was playing, and that's sort of that fulfilled a certain aspect of my I don't know. I don't want to get too pretentious, sounding like a higher need, but so that's what caused me to go into an art program, and also the price of my local Florida State versus going to a private game design college was a big thing. But I was able to do what I wanted, and I was so I was exposed to so much different stuff, like from sculpture to all the different foreign languages I took to, singing lessons, all of which I ended up using in the game projects I made at the time. Right. I made an audio only game where at one point you're walking around and I had all of my friends like act like they were singing in the shower. So you're like walking around this giant shower where all these people were sort of singing in different areas. And I was, so just like, it was, not something that I, would really not release nowadays, but it's fun to look back on from my university days. But, and also, I worked at that time, I was working at the Florida HIV/AIDS hotline, doing counseling. And one thing I've noticed and talked about before is how much game design is similar to counseling, because in counseling, you're, if somebody calls and they're having, there were no trigger warnings here, so I don't want to get too deep into the dark stuff. But like, if somebody calls and they're having a really, really intensive crisis, and you have a sense of, what would help them get out of that, you don't give them advice. You don't tell them what to do. Right. You get with them where they are, and then you sort of, you through, possibly through leading questions, you can kind of possibly get them to where you think they should be, but it's not a direct path. Sure. And game design also is not a direct path. Level design is not a direct path. Part of level design is making somebody feel like they're in this open environment and they can do whatever they want, but you're subtly leading them because you have a path you kind of think is the best one, and you're going to kind of help guide them toward that path. And so, all these things are really, they formed my experience as a game designer in different ways. Right.
And that's interesting. I mean, just listening to you talk, you kind of changed my perspective here on gamers, right? Because honestly, traditionally, I'm a computer scientist, and to me, it's about ones and zeros. It's about input, output. Yeah. And then you're looking at it from the creative perspective, which granted, you need that. But then the therapy aspect that you kind of threw in there, I'm like, wow, that's interesting, because you're right. It is a form of therapy to a certain extent. You got to have, I don't want to say you have to have a degree in therapy or whatever to be a gamer, but it certainly helps to understand the human mind. And I think that's really where you're going with this.
Right. And there is one class that we actually have one of our psychology faculty who teaches it a lot. It's called Designing for Humans. It's a human computer interaction class where you're, it's all about like, understanding how people use objects, right? So there are totally, psychologists who are working in game design and interested in game design. But, there's another side to, one of the benefits of, either as a budding game designer going into a program where you have other game designers who are interested in the same thing and who you can team up with, or, working with people online or people, in person, is that game design is a much more social thing than you imagine. Like if you're a young programmer and the thing you love most of all is sitting in front of a computer by yourself and coding, I mean, that's a really like beautiful thing to do, and a really, really relaxing thing to do, and a really, really lovely thing to do. But I hope you're able to be a successful indie game developer, because if you're going into the gaming industry, you got to be able to work with other people. Right. And that's one of the things that you get a chance to do when you go into a university program, is you get to, sometimes you're forced to work with people you don't want to work with, and you have to learn, sometimes by the seat of your pants, conflict mediation stuff. Right. And we give structures that make conflict mediation easier, and obviously if you've got a good professor, they'll grade you so that, if somebody just doesn't do anything on a group project, they won't get the same A that you get. But but you still have to deal with all sorts of conflict with so many different personality types.
Right.
And you have to learn how to communicate your ideas to people. And
Right.
coding itself, I've been able in the past couple of years to be able to develop and teach these classes that I really love, which
Right.
are advanced coding classes. But on the one hand, they're about coding, but they're not just about coding. Like, they're about communication.
Sure.
And they're about like writing code itself that communicates properly with other people.
Hey, first and foremost, Aaron, you're awesome. And I just want to thank you for being here on Foresight. Just a wealth of knowledge. You know, just I'm glad you found the time just to come here and just chat with me about gaming and simulation. For my audience, hey, if you want to get in touch with Aaron, I provided Aaron's email here. It's aoldenberg@ubalt.edu. So I'll make this available for everyone. If anyone wants to reach out and ask Aaron any additional questions about gaming and simulation development. But we will be back. Foresight will return in November 2021 with a great or cool episode. So be looking out for the advertisements. And thank you, Aaron, and be blessed, everyone.
Thank you too, Nat. This was a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to your next episode a lot.
Thanks, man.